To open the groundwork or balance of these new politicians, feudum, saith Calvin, the lawyer, is a Gothic word of diverse significations. For it is taken either for war or for a possession of conquered lands, distributed by the victor unto such of his captains and soldiers as had merited in his wars, upon condition to acknowledge him to be their perpetual lord, and themselves to be his subjects. Of these, there were three kinds of orders. The first of nobility, distinguished by the titles of dukes, marquesses, and earls, and these being gratified with cities, castles, and villages of the conquered Italians, their feuds participated of royal dignity, and were called regalia, by which they had right to coin money, create magistrates, take toll, customs, confiscations, and the like. Feuds of the second order were such as, with the consent of the king, were bestowed by these feudatory princes upon men of inferior quality, called their barons, or on condition that next unto the king they should defend the dignities and fortunes of their lords in arms. The lowest order of feuds were such as being conferred by those of the second order upon private men, whether noble or not noble, obliged them in the like duty unto their superiors. These were called vavassors. And this is the Gothic balance, by which all the kingdoms this day in Christendom were at first erected, for which cause, if I had time, I should open in this place the empire of Germany and the kingdoms of France, Spain, and Poland, but so much as hath been said, being sufficient for the discovery of the principles of modern prudence in general, I shall divide the remainder of my discourse, which is more particular, into three parts. The first showing the constitution of the late monarchy of Oceana, the second the dissolution of the same, and the third the generation of the present commonwealth. The constitution of the late monarchy of Oceana is to be considered in relation unto the different nations by whom it hath been successively subdued and governed. The first of these were the Romans, the second the Teutons, the third the Scandians, and the fourth the Neustrians. The government of the Romans, who held it as a province, I shall omit because I am to speak of their provincial government in another place. Only it is to be remembered in this that if we have given over running up and down naked and with dappled hides, learn to write and read, to be instructed with good arts, for all these we are beholding to the Romans, either immediately or mediately by the Teutons, for that the Teutons had the arts from no other hand is plain enough by their language, which hath yet no word to signify either writing or reading, but what is derived from the Latin. Furthermore, by the help of these arts so learned, we have been capable of that religion which we have long since received. Wherefore it seemeth unto me that we ought not to detract from the memory of the Romans, by whose means we are, as it were, of beasts become men, and by whose means we might yet of obscure and ignorant men, if we thought not too well of ourselves, become a wise and a great people. The Romans having governed Oceania provincially, the Teutons were the first that introduced the form of the late monarchy. To these succeeded the Scandians, of whom, because their reign was short, as also because they made little alteration in the government as to the form, I shall take no notice. But the Teutons, going to work upon the Gothic balance, divided the whole nation into three sorts of feuds: that of Ealdorman, that of King's Thane, and that of Middle Thane. When the kingdom was first divided into precincts, with what will be as hard to show as when it began first to be governed, it being impossible that there should be any government without some division. The division that was in use with the Teutons was by counties, and every county had either its ealdorman or high reeve. The title of ealdorman came in time to earl, or earl, and that of high reeve to high sheriff. Earl of the shire or county denoted the king's thane, or tenant by grand serjeantry, or knight's service in the chief or in capite. His possessions were sometimes the whole territory, from whence he had his denomination. That is the whole country, sometimes more than one county, and sometimes less, the remaining part being in the crown. He had also sometimes a third, or some other customary part of the profits of certain cities, boroughs, or other places within his earldom. For an example of the possessions of earls in ancient times, Ethelred had unto him and his heirs the whole kingdom of Mercia, containing 3 or 4 counties, and there were others that had little less. King Thane was also an honorary title unto which he was qualified, that had 5 hides of land, held immediately of the king by service of personal attendants, insomuch that if a churl or countryman had thriven unto this proportion, having a church, a kitchen, a bell house, that is a hall with a bell in it to call his family to dinner, a borough gate with a seat, that is a porch, of his own, and any distinct office in the king's court, then was he the king's thane. But the proportion of an hideland, otherwise called caruca, or a plowland, is difficult to be understood because it was not certain. Nevertheless, it is generally conceived to be so much as may be managed with one plow, and would yield the maintenance of the same with the appurtenances in all kinds. The middle thane was feudal, but not honorary. He was also called vavassor, and his lands a vavassory, which held of some mesne lord, and not immediately of the king. Possessions of their tenures, being of this nature, show the balance of the Teuton monarchy, wherein the riches of earls were so vast, that to arise from the balance of their kingdom unto their power, they were not only called reguli, or little kings, but were such indeed, their jurisdiction being of 2 sorts, either that which was exercised by them in the court of their counties, or in the high court of the kingdom. In the territory denominating an earl, if it were all his own, the courts held, and the profits of that jurisdiction were to his own use and benefit. But if he had but some part of his county, this, his jurisdiction and courts, saving perhaps in those possessions that were his own, were held by him to the king's use and benefit. That is, he commonly supplied the office which the sheriffs regularly executed in countries that had no earls, and whence they came to be called vice-comites. The court of the county that had an earl was held by the earl and the bishop of the diocese, after the manner of the sheriff's torns unto this day, by which means both the ecclesiastical and temporal laws were given in change together unto the country. The causes of vavassors or vavassories appertained to the cognizance of this court, where wills were proved, judgment and execution given, cases criminal and civil determined.